You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome into the show. I'm your host, Matt Reynoldson, and happy fall camp. Football is officially on the menu today with the start of Arizona fall practice. Before we get to all our football content, I want to remind you to please subscribe to the Bleav in Arizona podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, wherever you get your shows, as well as over on Bleav.com. My YouTube page will host all the video versions of this podcast. That's at Matt_Reynoldson. All right, we are officially 1 month away. The 1 month countdown has officially begun. Arizona football starting off the 2024 season, August 31st. That's against New Mexico under the lights at Arizona Stadium. A 7:30 p.m. kickoff to kick off the Brent Brennan era and the Big 12 era for Arizona football. We're certainly excited for that. We got our first taste of the 2024 Wildcats today on the practice field over at Dick Tomey Practice Fields, newly decorated in the fence linings kind of all around there. They're putting out their new slogan, or I guess the new team mantra, the red line, and so many other cool things over there to really kick off this era and establish the standard of what Arizona football is going to be under Brent Brennan. Okay, so when it comes to fall camp, whether it's training camp in the NFL or in college football, you tend to hope to see no news. That's the big thing. No news is good news because you'll get incremental development nuggets on guys, but what's the best case scenario coming out of fall camp? That an offensive lineman or a wide receiver looks good in practice reps or going on air, especially early in fall camp when they don't have the pads on. This running back emerges at the front of the pack, but you don't really see exactly what a football team is until they get into those competitive settings. And especially in today's era of college football and the NFL, where they're so focused on recovery, so focused on keeping guys healthy, that's the main priority. So there's not going to be a lot of live hitting in fall camp for Arizona or really beyond anywhere else in college football, and especially in the Big 12, where these rosters want to keep guys healthy, keep their depth from being tested until you really get into the grind of this football season. So unfortunately, we start off with some news from Arizona fall camp, and that is that left tackle or projected starting left tackle Raymond Pulido will be unavailable this season. Brent Brennan said that in his post-practice press conference this morning, I should say, and that came as a shock to many, especially because he didn't really explain what happened. He said he would be unavailable for the whole season, didn't disclose whether it's injury reasons, whether it's disciplinary reasons, something else. But Raymond Pulido will not be available for Arizona. So there goes your projected starting left tackle, and so many questions kind of surrounding his career. Obviously a very talented player. Last year dealt with a lot of injuries in the fall. And then in the spring as well, he actually was in the transfer portal in January, pulled his name out, came back to Arizona. That was considered a huge win for Coach Brennan and his staff. Getting Pulido back in the fold seemed like he was ready to be a massive contributor to this team, who was going to return one of the most experienced offensive lines in the Big 12, maybe outside of Oklahoma State and their formidable rushing attack. But Arizona was bringing back five guys really, with legitimate starting experience at the Power 5 level. And now it's down to 3 returning full-time starters and 4 guys that have seen starting time, at the Power 5 level legitimately. So your starting right tackle, that goes really without saying. Jonah Savaiinaea has that spot locked down. He's probably Arizona's best lineman prospect for the next level. He'll be a high draft pick whenever he chooses to enter his name to go to the next level. And then at right guard, you're probably looking at a guy like Leif Magnuson, who emerged late last year, played quite a bit in the bowl game. He has really an opportunity to be kind of that stalwart at right guard. Your center is going to be Josh Baker, no doubt about that. Unquestioned leader in the offensive line room, guy who makes the line calls. Definitely your guy who is established there at center. And your left guard is going to be Wendell Moe, coming off an all-conference season in the Pac-12. So That's a pretty solid group coming back for Arizona, but left tackle remains the question. So who steps in now for Raymond Pulido? We talked to Arizona football beat writer Justin Spears of the Arizona Daily Star and ESPN 1490 in Tucson on our podcast earlier this week, and he said there's a chance that a guy like Shanko Matatia could emerge at that left tackle spot. If it's not him, then it could be another transfer, a guy like maybe a Jonah Rodriguez or one of these other guys they brought in from other situations, other programs. Michael Wooten could be a possibility at that left tackle spot. Now, I talked to Josh Oglesby, the offensive line coach, earlier on in the spring, and he told me that he was going to cross-train all of his guys. He wanted all of his guys to be ready to play all 5 positions, and that's kind of what you hear a lot of the times now from offensive line coaches in the new age, that they want to be able to cross-train guys to play all these positions, so it's truly your best 5 out there at any given time. It also helps build depth. I think Arizona is going to be okay on the offensive line. I think they return a good group, but when you have attrition, which will happen because offensive linemen get beat up, they take it in the trenches a little bit. When you have attrition, you certainly don't want it to happen on the first day of fall camp and have it be a for sure out for the season situation. So tough news with Raymond Pulido there, but we'll see if Arizona can really find that left tackle early on in fall camp. And Brent Brennan put it well today. He said, we have a few weeks to figure it out who's going to step up at that left tackle spot, and a lot of guys with game experience coming in to compete at that left tackle spot. On the good news on the injury front, though, Tetairoa McMillan back at practice today after undergoing off-season foot surgery. So Arizona's best player, and perhaps its most important player, is not showing really any signs of being limited for the start of the season. Now, he was officially limited in practice today, didn't go through all the drills, but he was out there moving around well, moving with his teammates, and he really squashed any doubt about his status at Big 12 Media Days a few weeks ago, saying that he was 100% ready to go. There is no question about it, and the foot is not going to be a lingering problem going into the season. So great news on T-Mac, on one of Arizona's most important players, and probably their most important skill player on offense, without a doubt. Maybe their most important player overall, because he is just such a matchup nightmare for opposing teams. He and Noah Fafita really ate on the offensive side of the ball last year. So negative news and positive news out of day one of fall camp. We heard from Brent Brennan yesterday at a media luncheon discussing how excited he was to be ready and get going. So even though it was a little bit of a mixed bag of news on day one, it didn't quell any of the excitement, or didn't diminish any of the excitement going into a really exciting 2024 fall camp.
I'm excited to be back, and I think the staff is, and the players are. Even the players that I talked to, over the weekend, everyone's excited to get going. It's a cool thing about this job is that there's like a natural structure to your calendar. Like there is a specific, what's coming. And so as you start to get into late July, everybody starts to feel that excitement. There's more football on television. There's more people talking about it. When you see people wherever, out at the supermarket or at the wherever, Chipotle, they're like, "You guys ready for the year?" It starts building that momentum, and so that part of it is exciting. I'm excited that it's August and we're kicking it off. Let's go.
So why does spring camp look different than fall camp? Well, Brent Brennan discussed that a little bit yesterday, but it kind of comes down to being able to just get out there and hit guys and ramp up for something and not hold out your best players. Like Arizona was one of the few programs in the country, I think, that didn't have really any limitations on its top players, save for T-Mac, who had an injury in spring. Jacob Manu, a little bit of an injury as well, nicked up. But I think a lot of other players, a lot of other teams, in the Big 12 held out a lot of their top guys for different portions of spring. I know for a fact a lot of teams in the Big 10 did that as well. So you're going to see that more and more as programs try and develop younger players, try and keep guys involved, especially in this transfer portal era. You'll see teams and coaches develop some of their younger talent, spread more reps around in spring ball. Now in fall camp, it's different. It's the 105-man roster. You're going for it. You're getting guys in place and ready to roll. This is the group that is going to be the determiner of what Arizona does in this football season, whether that's game 1 against New Mexico or game 12 against ASU, potentially beyond in a Big 12 championship game or even in the college football playoff. This is the group, this is the team they need to get ready for the season. And I think we're seeing, obviously early, the results of what they want to come in and establish. We've had so much talk about the culture of this Arizona football team, how these players will fight for each other and play hard for each other. Now it's time to do that, to do all of that and mix it with coming in there and hitting each other. Jacob Manu has been itching to hit somebody in the A gap and get after somebody. This new group of defensive linemen is ready to come in and prove itself as, viable Big 12 defensive linemen, viable interior players, whether that's a guy like Chuba Maye, whether it's a guy like Taitai Uyunglele, or a new guy like Trey Smith. Justin Flo is looking forward to getting out there and hitting somebody as well. So when you look at the overall picture of fall camp and what it means for Arizona, I think it's going to be a week-to-week layering basis of getting guys used to the physicality, used to the hard-nosed mentality of the Big 12 conference, but also making sure guys are healthy, making sure you don't overwork players, and keeping guys hydrated too. And the Arizona heat as well is super important too. So there are so many priorities within fall camp and what Arizona needs to get done to be a successful football team in 2024. And Brennan talked a little bit about that yesterday in what he expects from this group this year.
I think every football team during fall camp is trying to continue to build that connection, that brotherhood. But then there's a physical component that you really haven't been able to do with the consistency that you do in fall. And this is the time where you start to build that. This is where your team comes together off the field and on the field. And it's hard and it's hot and you're tired and you're beat up, and the choices that those players make every day to get up and come together and do this again and put in the work together. It's the most fun part of the football season, is getting started and building the football team.
I mentioned Jacob Manu as one of those guys that's really embracing the physicality for this defensive group. And yesterday we learned that Tate Brown, the sophomore, will be the starter next to Jacob Manu in that inside linebacker room. So essentially you have, your back 7, potentially your back 8 solidified a little bit within this Arizona defense. I think there will be so many sets within Duane Akina's very multiple defense. And I say multiple with so much emphasis that they'll run 5 defensive backs out there. So we'll see who ends up being CB2. But, Takario Davis is your unquestioned top cornerback. He's projected as a potential first-round NFL draft pick. That's huge. You've got Traden Stukes back there. You've got Gunnar Maldonado. You've got Dalton Johnson. And you've got a guy like Genesis Smith, who is kind of a Swiss Army knife that you can play everywhere on the back end on defense. Stukes can also be that CB2. He can play corner. He came in as a corner in the first place and ended up kind of sliding into that nickel slot coverage role a little bit last year. So it'll be interesting to see how this defense comes together around those 2 inside linebackers. Like I mentioned, Tay Brown taking the spot next to Jacob Manu, and then obviously Justin Flo will have a big impact off the edge as well. So if that's your back 8, really all you got to decide is your front 3, and then you have a very strong defense for Duane Akina's first year as defensive coordinator at Arizona in what seems like his 50th year coaching. I believe it's actually his 43rd. On offense, we mentioned in the opener that there are questions now on the offensive line, but what helps a good offensive line is a very effective short passing game. Arizona will have opportunities to spread the ball around, whether that's to its running backs, who are quality pass catchers in guys like Rayshon Speedy Luke or Quali Conley, who can get the ball out of the backfield. You've got tight ends that are experienced blockers like Roberto Miranda. A guy like Kean Burnett can stretch the field from that tight end role. Arizona could run a lot of 12 personnel, which are 2 tight end sets with 1 running back. That's something we saw a little bit more of this spring. And Justin Spears in our podcast earlier this week discussed that a little bit on why we could see more 12 personnel and why it works with this personnel group. And then you got guys on the outside that can catch the ball and run with it. I mean, it's not just Tetairoa McMillan. It's also guys like Montana Lamonius Craig, who's caught more than a few screens in his time. And then Malachi Riley is somebody that Noah Fafita mentioned at Big 12 Media Days as somebody that's definitely an up-and-comer on this roster and somebody we could see make a major impact on this year's team. So many things that could be positives early on in fall camp for this group. But the number one priority is staying healthy. And I hate to end this part of the show on a glum note, but losing someone that you projected to be a starter on day one of fall camp for the entire season. We don't know if it was injury. We don't know if it's disciplinary. We don't know if it's personal reasons, whatever it is currently with Raymond Pulido, you won't have him for 2024. So they've got to figure out that offensive line, the depth on the left side very quickly, because the right side seems to be fairly set in stone for Arizona right now. Okay, pretty short show today, so I do want to discuss this before we wrap things up with our Bear Down Rundown. Jedd Fisch continuing to make headlines even months after he left for the University of Washington head coaching job. So in a press conference yesterday to kick off fall camp up in Seattle, he said that he bought Arizona players championship rings from the Alamo Bowl. While several reporters elsewhere in Tucson and elsewhere in Arizona have confirmed that there were no rings bought for the players that stayed at Arizona. So, look, I don't know what Jedd Fisch was doing, whether he was flaming the University of Arizona administration, whether he was trying to make himself look good, but this seems to be kind of an awkward trend with Jedd Fisch, that he tends to enlighten his own situation a little bit more than he should, and he is embellishing a lot of things. I know from good sources that I have and other sources throughout Tucson that he misrepresented the contract situation when it was presented to him. He said that the Board of Regents approval was the big roadblock in the way, and that they absolutely had no opportunity to get it done before February, and that he wanted to get it done. He wanted to sign right away. I've had people tell me that that's not accurate, and that he did not take his opportunity to sign the contract extension, to sign a pretty lucrative contract extension when he did. Now, granted, Washington was probably going to pay him more money in the grand scheme of things anyway, so he might have left regardless, but he kind of took that opportunity to take some shots at Arizona on the way out the door. And now he's taking shots a little bit, again, at the Arizona administration, saying that he and his wife had to purchase the rings for the Arizona players. Well, he only purchased championship rings for the Arizona players that followed him to Washington. So not exactly, he didn't explicitly lie about that, but the way he put it was misrepresenting the situation again. And we have seen the last few months of Jedd Fisch, him continually, again and again and again, digging himself into these holes and doing his best to bury Arizona at every turn. And my question is, why? Just move on. Just, get on with get on with your new program, get on with being in the Big Ten. Let's let the rear view be the rear view. Clearly, it didn't end in a very positive way. Clearly the 3-minute exit meeting was rubbing a lot of players' parents, a lot of administrators the wrong way in Tucson. And it's one of those things where it's just, you got to let it go, man. And I'm not telling the fans that they have to let it go, even though, I think we should all move on as those of us who pay attention to and support the University of Arizona. But I think Jedd Fisch, especially, $7 million man, needs to move on and focus on his own team and really never talk about Arizona again. That's my thought, because every time he brings up the U of A, every time he brings up his former Wildcats roster, every time he and Jonah Coleman bring up that they built everything that Arizona was last year, and not giving maybe the credit due to a guy like Noah Fafita or a guy like Tetairoa McMillan or some of the support staff or the assistants or the other guys that created this incredible culture, this incredible family atmosphere that created a 7-game winning streak for the Wildcats, which, by the way, is still the current second longest active winning streak in the nation. I think that's really unfortunate to see that Fisch continues to look in the rearview mirror. I want him to turn the page, close the door, and stop talking about Arizona, because every time he does, there will be reporters down here. There will be fans, players, parents that expose him for the lies he's telling. And even if they're not explicit lies, they are really not looking very transparent, very truthful in the grand scheme of things. So my best advice to Jedd Fisch: shut it off. Stop it. Turn it off. Shut it down. It's over. All right, want to wrap up the show as we always do with our Bear Down Rundown, a look at what's going on elsewhere in Arizona athletics. And want to take you to the baseball diamond. We heard from Chip Hale last week as Arizona announced the Mexican Baseball Fiesta once again to be taking place in October in Tucson. Arizona will play another exhibition game against a Mexican National League team. So we'll see that. We'll get to see a little fall taste of the Wildcats and see what they do this fall. We did see that last year. So Chip Hale, obviously a big proponent of that and proponent of what these professional teams can do for his squad and their development, and seeing, what these guys bring to the baseball diamond. And clearly it paid dividends last year, because Arizona was the Pac-12 regular season champion and the Pac-12 tournament champion. And this year, there's a little bit of hype coming in around this Arizona baseball team, because they are 21st in Baseball America's way too early preseason rankings. And that would be the second highest ranked team in the Big 12 coming in. Oklahoma State slotted in at number 15 in these way too early rankings. I think a lot of it when it comes to Arizona's ranking is about the bats. And an important announcement from Chip Hale: the Wildcats will be bringing back Garen Caulfield, who was the stalwart in the center of Arizona's defense at second base right there. It was a strong bat in the lineup. Obviously, you bring back a guy like that, and they have an impressive group coming back. I mean, the 21st ranking is really all about the bats. Arizona brings back Mason White, home run leader, Brendan Summerhill, who went on a tear last year, Caulfield, other guys that they brought in, young guys who played, a lot last year, a guy like Xavier Esker, Emilio Corona off the top of my head. So many of these players that they're developing as useful and consistent bats and consistent defenders as well. So I think this Arizona baseball team can be really good next year. We'll see a taste of it in the fall. But the big thing is they'll have to replace their entire starting pitching staff. All three weekend starters, that's Jackson Kent, the Friday night starter, Clark Candiotti, the Saturday night starter, and Cam Walty, the Sunday starter, all got drafted in the Major League Baseball 2024 draft. So that's a weekend rotation that they'll have to figure out and have to get together. But Kevin Vance, in his first year coming over from Boston College as Chip Hale's pitching coach, was one of the top assistants in the nation this year. Arizona with very high marks in ERA, in WHIP, in so many other great metrics, and probably one of the best pitching years we have seen from Arizona baseball since the mid-2000s. We'll see if they can replicate that success. But the big thing is this will always be a program that's going to swing the bat and swing it into that high desert air, a little elevation in Tucson that ball carries a little bit further at High Corbett Field. So we'll see some dingers next year. We'll see some productive bats, and should be a very exciting year once again for Arizona baseball. It is football season, though, so we've got so much to talk about with that. We'll have these podcasts coming up more frequently, talking maybe 4, maybe 5 times a week as we discuss Arizona fall camp leading up to the 2024 season. I'll be at practice on Friday in Tucson, so certainly excited to see the boys in action as they ramp up towards those padded practices beginning next week. But it should be really exciting to see how this Wildcats football team comes together for Brent Brennan, not against him, certainly, comes together for their new coach, and comes together to really become a formidable foe in the Big 12 and potentially make a run at a college football playoff. We'll take our first look on Friday, so make sure to tune in for that. But thanks for listening to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Have a great one.